Because what I found is that that perfect moment doesn't exist. So how do we work through it? How do we gather the courage to do the scary thing anyway? And that's what I want this book to be, is that love letter, that pep talk, that thing to help you through it and that you can return to once you have outgrown your comfort zone and you need to level up again.
My name is Bethany Saltman, and I am an author and a best-selling book coach.
And I'm Fran Hauser. I'm an author, a keynote speaker, and a publishing strategist. These How I Did It conversations will inspire listeners to claim their own authority mindset and turn the story they can't stop telling into a book the world needs to read.
This is Bookbound, the podcast, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. Welcome to the show, everyone. You are in for an absolute treat this episode. I'm excited to introduce you to L'Oreal Thompson Payton. She's an award-winning journalist and author of Stop Waiting for Perfect, Step Out of Your Comfort Zone and Into Your Power. Her work has been featured in Essence, Fortune, Shondaland, and many other notable outlets. And beyond her stellar accolades, she's just an incredible human being when it comes to being open and honest about her experiences. She sat down with Fran and I and really dove into the difficulties, both personal and professional, she faced throughout her bookbound journey. Her energy is infectious, her vulnerability is captivating, and I think you'll walk away with more than a few pieces of inspiration. So without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with L'Oreal. We are so excited to be joined today by L'Oreal Thompson Payton, author of this amazing book, Stop Waiting for Perfect, with all my little Post-it notes. So excited to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So I'm going to dive in with the question we like to ask all of our guests. It's about the story at the heart of this book, and how did you know that this was a book and not something else? Because you've been in the writing space for a long time. This is not your first rodeo. And I know that you worked on a book earlier and then that didn't come to fruition. So tell us about that journey. Like, how did you know this was the one? And so anything else that you want to share in there?
I always reflect on and think about this Toni Morrison quote that I saw where she says, if there's a book you want to read that hasn't been written yet, you have to write it. And I really took that to heart. Like, I took that as a call to action. Like, well, if Toni's doing it, telling me to do it, then I have to do it. And I have loved self-help books since I was a little girl. Like, I devoured Chicken Soup for the Soul, like, pun intended. That was my jam. I loved it. I read so many of those editions. And as I got older, I loved the Brene Browns of the world, Jen Sincero, Tiffany Dusu, like the list goes on. But what I was missing from my perspective then as a younger, like early 30s Black woman, was something written in the now, like more that peer-to-peer kind of conversation. Because what I was seeing in their books, which are really well written and they're very wise women, but it just seemed like they had their shit together and I didn't. So I was like, where do I fit in? Where does my perspective and my journey make sense? And it's interesting. And at the onset, trying to write this book about overcoming imposter syndrome and having a lot of imposter syndrome myself around that, and talking to friends, and they're like, actually, that's why you're the perfect person to write about it, because I'm still in it. Even now, a few months after the book has been published and it's out in the world, there is still that imposter syndrome and that self-doubt. Is this good enough? Am I good enough? And what I appreciate, and I hope that this book becomes for people, you had your marked up version with the Post-it notes, is that they refer to it time and time again when they find themselves in these situations where they are doubting themselves, where they don't feel as though they're good enough, or they're waiting for this perfect moment to launch their podcast, to write their own book, to switch careers, right? Because what I found is that that perfect moment doesn't exist. So how do we work through it? How do we gather the courage to do the scary thing anyway? And that's what I want this book to be, is that love letter, that pep talk, that thing to help you through it and that you can return to once you have outgrown your comfort zone and you need to level up again.
I love that. I think you were very successful. One of the things that I really enjoyed about the book was the way that you were so present in what you said, the now of the experience.
So, L'Oreal, you've spoken about how much rejection, right, you received going through this process of trying to find an agent and trying to find a publisher. which is so common, right? We all go through that. Every single aspiring author and author, we experience that. And it would just be so helpful for our listeners to hear your story. And, what was that like for you?
Very daunting. It's a very daunting process. And I remember vividly, and that's kind of how that Hall of Fame rejection list came about in the book, because I was telling a friend of mine who wants to be a writer, is just starting out. And she's like, oh, and I got rejected. I'm like, that's great. That's amazing. Congratulations. And she's like, that's bad. This is bad. This is all bad. And I was like, no, because it means you were brave enough to put yourself out there in the first place. And so many people don't even make it that far. In order to get rejected, that means you tried, and the trying is worthy of celebration as well. And that you didn't get in your own way and that you put yourself out there. That's really hard. A, and then B, to get rejected and then try to do it again requires even more bravery and courage. And I firmly believe, and I write in the book that courage and confidence, like these are muscles that we have to work out just like our physical muscles. And I don't think rejection gets easier. I think for me, it's gotten less personal, where I can accept that this is part of the process. And that's what it means to be a writer. I mean, when I was looking for an agent, because I'm very stubborn, right? Because sometimes people ask too, like, well, why not just self-publish, like just in quotation marks? Because I mean, to write a book is a feat, no matter how you go about it. So that's not to minimize that at all. I think it's the journalist in me who is very stubborn, and the credibility that comes along with a traditional publishing route, and wanting to see my book at Barnes and Noble, right? Like have all those kind of like mini milestones to check off and achieve. But one of the first agents that I reached out to, because I had a whole spreadsheet, I read the acknowledgments of the books that I admired, found out who their agents were, did a lot of that background work. And this one that I reached out to was like, I love your voice. I love this idea. I think this is a great book. Come back when you have 20,000 followers. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Because at the time, I think I had like 6 or 8,000 across all platforms. And that was very discouraging to me, because publishing is a business, book selling is a business. They're in the business of selling books. Okay, don't take it personally, but it's hard not to when basically this person is saying, you have the talent and you have the gift, but you don't have the followers. Where does popularity come into this? And it was frustrating because, I even have on my shelf some people who I'm just going to say are not great writers that have millions of followers and the influence. And so they get the book deals, and it feels very much like high school all over again, where I'm not the popular girl and, your talent doesn't matter. And it's very discouraging. And in those moments, I had to return to my why. Like, why do you want to do this? Why does this book matter so much to you? And I think, and I write in the book as well about 5-year-old me, 16-year-old me, who didn't see herself represented, who didn't hear her story told from someone who looks like her, and what I needed back then. And that has kept me going, even now with the book being published. And, we're at the end of the year and there's all of the best of list. And then I'm getting like triggered now because everyone's rounding up like, oh, books I'm looking forward to in 2024. And mine weren't on any of the 2023 list. And so there's a lot of jealousy that plays a role in that as well. And I think what I do, just because I don't have the bandwidth to pretend, is be honest about that. Like these emotions that are traditionally, we're very ashamed about, because we should all be right. So grateful and so honored and so humbled. No, I want to win. I want to be on the list too. I'm feeling left out. I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling like I'm not good enough and my work isn't good enough, because that's a natural human emotion. And we do ourselves a disservice when we brush past it or try to like sweep it under the rug. No, we need to acknowledge and honor the emotions, feel it, have the pity party if you need to. And when you're ready, get back out into the ring.
Oh my gosh, so great. I wanted to ask you or talk to you about the way that you talk about envy and jealousy, because I found it so refreshing.
Yeah.
As someone who I can really relate to you and your story, and just having like a major hustle factor
Mhm.
going on. And it is really hard to see other people succeed, in air quotes. How do you understand this in terms of being a woman, and particularly being a Black woman? Because obviously your book is about perfectionism. Tell us a little bit about the intersection of imposter syndrome, perfectionism, envy, jealousy, and being a woman.
I think the best way, and I include this in the book as well, is, and it's very vivid to me, and I can see the scene play out every time I talk about it. But that scene in Scandal where Papa Pope is laying into Olivia and he is chastising her for sleeping with the president. But the message is applicable to every Black woman, Black person I know in America, any marginalized, whoever, like insert category here. And that notion that you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. And when I heard it the first time, I was like, he put into words something that I've certainly felt my entire life, that my parents certainly instilled in me and my sister, even if they didn't use those exact words, that sentiment was certainly shared and encouraged. And I remember vividly going to a summer camp in middle school, and this is middle school, right? So it should be like fun and having, my portfolio with my report cards and my perfect attendance awards and all their certificates and dressed in my Easter's best to give in the middle of humidity in the Baltimore summer. They're very hot and icky and just gross. And so, but doing all of that to present as worthy, as if I deserve to be here because it's like, okay, the transcript may be not enough. You have to look a certain way as well. You have to perform. You have to meet these expectations. You cannot just rest on your laurels as a Black woman in America. You constantly have to show up and do more than your white counterparts in order to get ahead, in order to succeed, in order to get the promotion, in order to get accepted to summer camp. And so that was a lesson that I learned very early on. And as I've gotten older, I've just witnessed firsthand the physical and mental health consequences and repercussions of that, the stress and the burnout and the anxiety and the depression, because as I've gotten older, what I realized, I can work my ass off. I can do everything that is asked of me and required of me. And it's never going to be enough because they're constantly going to move the bar and push back the goalpost. And so that's when I just decided a conscious uncoupling with my worth and productivity, because it is not worth it to me. My mental health matters more. But that takes a lot of unlearning. It takes a lot of therapy. It takes a lot of that inner work to just say, enough already. I'm going to choose different. I'm going to get off of this hamster wheel because it is not serving me. And it never has. And nor did it serve my mom or my grandmother, but they also it was a survival mechanism. That's what they had to do to get ahead. And that was the best that they knew. So that's what they passed on. But this isn't what I want to pass on to my daughter. And so it's up to me to choose and model a different way for her and also my peers and even my family as well.
Yeah. And when we're jealous and we're envious, we're not serving our peers, like you said.
It's just such an important message for young women and in particular young Black women. So I'm just so appreciative that you wrote this book. I think it's really needed in the world.
So then take us back to, this was the book you wanted to write because this is the book you wanted to read. Then what? How did it come to life?
Yeah, it's so funny. The working title that I titled my Google Doc when I had this moment of inspiration in the middle of the workday, as we all do. Literally, I was in the bathroom and this voice whisper was like, the Millennial Manual. And I was like, okay. And that came about at the time. I had just switched careers from journalism into communications. I was working at the local school system. That wasn't the goal. I wanted to get into nonprofit for girls, but this was kind of my bridge. This is what I needed to do to get to where I wanted to be. And I had written blog posts about switching careers. I still had a side hustle as a freelance writer, all these different things that people have come to me for advice on. And I figured, let's consolidate and put it into a book package. That was the idea. That was 2015. The imposter syndrome got the best of me. The Google Doc sat and waited until 2017. And I bought actually Jen Sincero's nonfiction book proposal course. She had an online course as a 30th birthday gift to myself. Also, she included the actual proposal that she used for You Are a Badass. And so I was like, okay, this is great. I'm going to learn from a professional. This is awesome. And then again, the imposter syndrome and the perfectionism and the self-doubt halted me. And I was like, you're not her. So who do you think you are to write a book was the thing that constantly played in the background of my head. But then I'm still freelancing. I'm still writing. This topic is still very near and dear to my heart. Although I'll say when I started initially with the idea, imposter syndrome wasn't trending in the way that it is now. There was a time when it was kind of what is this thing? And now it's everywhere. And so I was like, well, now, everyone's talking about it, so this doesn't matter. I'm too late. All of these excuses that I came up in my head to procrastinate is essentially how my perfectionism manifested in that moment. But in 2018, I was finally like, okay, we've got the spreadsheet. Let's start querying the agents, and got met with rejection after rejection after rejection. And it's funny because the agent I'm signed with now is one of the original ones that said no. And so that's another tip for people. Sometimes, it may be just a no right then, but that doesn't mean it's a no forever. And I had actually two agents before the one that I'm signed with currently. And I think that's something else we don't talk about enough in the publishing world, about when it's not a good match, when you need to fire your agent. That happens. And I was very afraid to do that, even though I knew it was the best thing, because what if I don't get another chance? What if someone else doesn't say yes? Right. So there's that fear, but I had to let go of that fear because I believed in my book and I knew that it was bigger than the situation that I was in. And so I parted ways. And right around the summer of 2020, which we all know what was happening in the summer of 2020. I mean, everything and everybody was having this racial reckoning in quotation marks, because we know now, just several years later, how it all kind of panned out. But I think it was this moment in time, especially in publishing, where there was this revelation of, oh, wow, like hashtag publishing so white. And people were like, oh, quick, we need Black writers. Who has projects? And that happened to me and a couple of my other author friends who got deals around the same time. I think that obviously we are talented, we're smart, we're Black women. We have to be, right? Especially in this industry. And it was also that moment where there was the hunger and the need for Black authors. And we were, it's unfortunate circumstances, absolutely. And we just happened to be right place at the right time in terms of what was happening with the industry at large. And so, I mean, we had a couple of publishers that were interested, but it was still a smaller one. Both of them were small that we ended up going with. And honestly, I mean, I know everyone's goal is big five and all of that, but I love my publisher, and my publicist in particular. Jennifer, if you're listening, I love you. It's so amazing. And the attention, the hands-on, like it felt like I was in good hands. And I don't know that I would have gotten that same level of attention and hands-on help had I been with a larger publisher. And so I'm very much, believe everything happens for a reason in its own timing. And then the people that I've been working with, I mean, it was an amazing dream team from agent to editor and publicist. All are like the best people in the world. They're amazing.
Wow. So you wrote the proposal and then you waited on it, and then you got one agent, it wasn't the right agent, and then you got the next agent was the right agent.
The one after that, there was two prior to her. Yeah. Third time was a charm.
Yeah, no, I'm with you all the way. And summer 2020 happened and the timing was right in publishing, but you had a completed book proposal and an agent at that time, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you were prepared for the moment, which is a theme we're seeing in a lot of the authors that we talk to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wrote a newsletter. This is very, small potatoes compared to what we're talking about, but I wrote about how manifestation, it gets a bad rap. I feel like a lot of people say it like, just put it out in the universe or like on your vision board and it will happen. And I was like, no, manifestation is about doing the work and meeting the moment. So we had this opportunity in August when I was in New York to promote the book on CBS Mornings. And I was like, well, I'm in New York. I love Peloton. Peloton is here. My favorite instructor has a yoga class, at 8:30 on Sunday morning. I couldn't get in like on the website. It was already booked, but I was like, I'm going to show up at the studio anyway. I'm going to get on the wait list. I also DM'd her, right? So Chelsea definitely had my back in that regard. And it worked out, but it was like, I did the work to meet the moment and then it happened. But you can't just waltz into Peloton studio and expect, things to happen in the same way with the book. Like I did the work and I was prepared. And then the moment came and I said, yes.
You went with Ben Bella. Ben Bella is the name of your publishing company, right?
Yes, correct.
And in reading up on them, it was really interesting to read that they position themselves as a marketing focused publisher. I've never read that before about a publisher, whether, big five. So tell us a little bit about that. What does it mean to be a marketing focused publisher? What was your experience with them?
And that really caught my eye too. It's funny because my first meeting with Jennifer, having had a marketing and communications background, I've done PR, like in addition to journalism. So it's like I know from all sides, like a 360 kind of. lens. And I told her, it's like, I'm either going to be your favorite client or your worst nightmare. I know too much. I know all the players. I know the editors. I've been on the receiving end of the pitches. I'm very hands on. Came to the meeting with my spreadsheet. She had her spreadsheet, and it's worked really well. I know my lane, and I, default to her on the things that I'm not an expert in. I mean, she's the one that landed me on CBS Mornings. I mean, who out the gate for their first book gets to be interviewed by Gail King? The large part, Jennifer and I told her, is like, even though I have done media training for other CEOs and people that I've worked for, and I am a journalist by trade, I've never done national TV before. Can we get me some media training so that I feel comfortable and confident when I'm on that stage? And she did. And it was incredible. Like, it all worked out. And so that was something that appealed to me when we were looking at different options. Rachel, my editor, was amazing. I'm very big on vibes, and the vibes were vibing in all the best ways. But knowing that they're marketing first, that they have that hands-on approach, that they're aware of what's going on in the market and is very smart about the opportunities as well. I was like, this is, especially as a debut author and a Black woman, because it was like, I need this to do well. I want to make a career out of writing books, and I want other Black women authors and marginalized authors to have opportunities as well. So there is a lot writing on this, but I knew that I was in good hands because I was like, oh, y'all got me. And even with my agent, like, talking to her, it was not just about this book, but my career as an author. And that was important as well, that she saw like the whole picture and is thinking honestly, like, even bigger than I am for myself. And those are the kind of people that you want on your team, because this industry is hard. It's very, very, very hard. It is not kind to smaller names, and it can be very easy to get lost and forgotten. And so finding the people that you trust with your book baby, essentially. I mean, I was writing my book at the same time as becoming a new mom, and like, the book was another like birthing, and someone that I know and trust who's going to help me raise this book as well was important to me.
What would you say were your biggest learnings on the marketing side of things, right? So you're working with Ben Bella and their marketing team. They're helping you get this book out into the world and get it amplified. And were there any kind of key learnings that you had just from working with them that aspiring authors could kind of take away from this conversation when they're thinking about launching their own books?
Yeah, you have a plan and things are not going to go according to plan, right? In my perfect world, I was having this multi-city tour. It's all independently owned bookstores by Black women. And there were some that just didn't get back to us, right? Because it's a big bet for the bookstore to order all of these copies, have an event in their space, and for someone who is relatively a no-name author, right? Sure, I have, a modest following, but I'm not a Roxane Gay, right? I'm not an Eve Ewing. Like, I don't have the hundreds of thousands of followers. So it's a gamble for them to say yes. So it was like, I had this idea, and that certainly can be the North Star, but allow for some flexibility. And I always like, allow life to surprise you, like, leave space for those opportunities that you maybe wouldn't have thought of, and say yes to them. Because I mean, I'm in a season now where it's like, yes, I'll do this podcast. Yes, I'll do that interview. Yes, I'll do when it's aligned and it makes sense, of course, with the audience and the listeners. But just opening my mind to different possibilities, because, you have an idea of how you want it to go. It may not turn out that way on the first go. And that's what I keep telling myself. Like, this is the first book, right? This is, people's first introduction and to me and what I'm about and what I write. And so just being flexible in that regard can take you a whole lot further than being very, like, it has to be this way or doesn't count or it doesn't matter. Jennifer's been really great with, here's the spreadsheet, here's who we're targeting, who are we missing, what do you think, how can we work together, fill in the gaps, and also leveraging my own personal context because I am in media. So I have and I'm on Twitter all day, too much. And I know it's dying.
What I love, and I really want to stress this because you've said this a few times, the idea of having your spreadsheet. For both of my book launches, I had my spreadsheet. I called it my tracker, and whether it was media contacts, influencers, people that are going to blurb the book, young women that I'd mentored over the years that I really felt would be open to reviewing the book on Amazon or Goodreads, like, just tracking all of those people. Your personal network is gold when it comes to launching a book.
Yeah. And I very much iterated. I was like, listen, social media matters, all of that matters, press matters. And my most loyal readers are my newsletter subscribers. They are loyal. As soon as that pre-order reached, they were like, yes, up for this award. They're like, we're going to vote. And then we're giving it as gifts. So I would go to them first with like, hey, like the link is live. Like, hey, these are the tour dates. Hey, check out this interview. Because if someone gives you their email address, like that's real estate in their inbox. They want to hear from you. They care about what you have to say. And I always prioritize them when it came to news about the book. And I took them along with me on the journey. Like even before we got the deal and the agent, it was like, hey, I got this rejection this week. This sucks, but I'm going to keep trying. And they also are like, they're the beta readers. They are the target audience. And so like they kept me going as well when I would share these highs and lows. They're like, we can't wait to read it. We're so excited. And that kept me going as well. Like having those cheerleaders in my inbox every Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, like they're there for me. And it's a two-way street. It's a lot of love.
So good and so important for young, newish writers to keep this in mind, that it's not just about getting out there and trying to get followers, get reviews, get a deal. There's a lot of giving that has to go into this work. And when we are of service, when we remember that it's a two-way street, I think that we just get so much more out of it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the opportunities that have come to me, like, yes, CBS, of course, was a highlight, kicking off the book tour. Tour is a strong word. It was Baltimore and Chicago and New York, but places where I knew like my people were. But to go to my hometown library and get to do a reading, and my dad's in the audience, and I dedicated the book to him, and the library holds a very special place in our heart. And, you read the book and know that I wrote a book about dinosaurs in outer space when I was 6. And he was the one who encouraged me to pursue writing, as like more than a hobby even. And like, you can do this for real and make a living out of it. That full circle moment, going back to my high school. I went to an all-girl Catholic high school and they invited me back to read, and there were tears there on my part. It was just very emotional. And all the book events where there's, Black moms who are like, oh, I'm getting this for my daughter and my mom and my aunt and my cousin, that this can have this generational kind of ripple effect is more than anything I can imagine. So it's like, yes, the list would be great. The awards would be amazing. And because I'm not downplaying the significance that those do play for debut authors in particular, and the screenshots that I save, the DMs that I get, the text messages and emails that I have from people who have read it and like, this made a difference in my life, like this impacted me. That is what matters. That's why I do this. That is the reason. And so I hold on to that in those moments of the self-doubt and the jealousy and like, well, why wasn't I included in this roundup? Or why? That doesn't actually matter. Your goal was to help people, especially Black women and girls, and you're doing that. So take that to heart.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, so good. So what's next? What are you working on now?
Interestingly enough, I just finished a draft for a children's book that will be coming out in October 2025. Still waiting for, the official announcement and everything. And then it's back to the drawing board with a book proposal and what I hope will be, I really want to write an infertility memoir. My husband and I had a really long IVF journey to having our daughter. And I've written a lot about it in different articles, but I feel like there needs to be more diverse spaces in the parenting realm and reproductive health, especially. So that's what I'm working on now.
Oh, amazing. L'Oreal, this was so great. Honestly, your energy is just, oh my gosh, I just want to bottle it up. I feel like you showed up so fully. You were so generous in this interview. I learned so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And please tell our listeners, what's the best way to connect with you, to follow you? Where can they find you?
Absolutely. Everything is at ltinthecity.com. You can subscribe to my motivational newsletter. You can buy Stop Waiting for Perfect and follow me on social media, also at LT in the City.
Amazing. Thank you, L'Oreal.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you both. I love talking shop. So this was a really fun conversation.
Isn't it so fun? Yeah, we love it too.
So fun. Have the best day.
Thank you for joining us on Bookbound.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe and rate and review us on your favorite podcast listening platform.
Please visit us at bookboundpodcast.com for more on us and how we work with authors.